I'm awake. I'm awake. At once. Anodora. At once. My path is clear. Of course. Anodora. My path is clear. Anodora. Of course. Anodora. Of course. Anodora. At once. Anodora. My path is clear. Of course. Victory is at hand. At once. I'll make short work of them. Anodora. My path is clear. At once. My path is clear. Of course. My path is clear. Where shall I strike? Of course. I'm awake. I'm awake. Where shall I strike? Anodora. Of course. At once. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Of course. My path is clear. At once. Anodora. My path.
Our allies'
Victory
town
is at hand. I'll make short work. Of course. My path is clear. I'm awake. I'm awake. At once. Of course. My path is clear. Victory is at hand. I'll make short work of them. Where shall I strike? Of course. My path is clear. At once. Bear arms. My path. Victory is at hand. I'll make short work. Anodora. Of course. Anodora. Of course. Anodora. Our time is short. I'm awake. I'm awake. Of course. Anodora. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. I'll make short work of them. At once. My path. At once. My path is clear. Bear arms. I'll make short work of them. Bear arms. Once. My path is clear. Our time is short, of course. At once. Anodora. At once. Anodora. At once. I'll make short work. Bear arms. I'll make short work. My strength is yours. Of course. My path is clear. Where shall I strike? Anudura. Our time is short. Bear arms. At once. My path is clear. Anudura. I'll make short work. Victory is at hand. Of course. At once. Anudura. Bear arms.
First blood. Needs help.
I'll make short work of them. Victory is at hand. My path is clear.
Our
At
allies'
once.
town needs help.
Of course. Where shall I strike? At once. My path is clear. I'm awake. I'm awake. At once. Bear arms. My strength is yours. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Anudura. Of course. I'm awake. I'm awake. Where shall I strike? Bear arms. At once. Anudura. My path is clear. Victory is at hand. At once. Of course. Anudura. At once. Bear arms. I'll make short work. My path is clear. At once. Anudura. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. In Nordrasil's name. My strength is yours. Bear arms.
Our allies' town needs help.
My path is clear. At once. Anudura. I'm awake. I'm awake.
Our allies' town needs help.
Victory
Our
is
allies'
at hand.
town needs help.
I'll make short work of it. My strength is yours. Of course. At once. Of course. Anudura. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Of course.
Where shall my blood be spilled?
Where shall I strike? Anudora.
Our allies' town needs
Of
help.
course. I'll make short work of them. Victory is at hand.
Our allies' town needs help.
Once. Anudora.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. My strength is yours. I'll short you. Victory is at hand. At once. Our time is short. Of course. At once. Anudora, my path is clear. Bear arms. I'll make short work. Anudora, at once. Of course. Bear arms. I'll make short work. I'm awake. I'm awake.
Our allies' town
Anudora.
needs help.
My path is clear. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. At once. I'll make short work. In Lord Drasil's name. Of course. Anudora. My path is clear.
Our allies' town needs help.
Anudora. Bear arms. Our time is short. Victory is at hand. My path is clear. At once. Of course. Anudora. My path is clear. Anudora. I'll make short work of it. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. My path is clear. Of course.
Our allies'
At once.
town needs help.
Of course. Once. Bear arms. In Lord Drasil's name. I'll make short work of it. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. My path. Anudora. At once. My path is clear. Of course. At once. What? My strength is yours. I'll make short work of it. Anudora. Of course. At once. Of course. Victory is at hand. At once. I'll make short work of them. Of course. My path is clear. Anudora. Of course. At once. Victory is at hand. In Nordrasil's name. Bear arms. Anudora. Victory is at hand. In Nordrasil's name. At once. Bear arms. I'll make short work of it. Victory is at hand. My path is clear. I'll make
Our
short
allies' town needs help.
Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Anudora. Bear arms.
Killing spree.
The sleeper has awakened. Where shall I strike?
Our allies' town
I'm
needs
awake.
help.
I'm awake. Of course. My path is clear. I'll make short work. My strength is yours.
Our
Where shall I
allies'
strike?
town needs help.
Thy bidding, master.
What? I'm awake. I'm awake. Our time is short. Anudora.
Our allies' town needs help. Our allies' town
The
needs
sleeper
help.
has awakened. Of course. Anudora. Of course. Where shall I strike? At once.
Our allies' town needs help.
Of course. Bear arms. Anudora. I'll make short. Of course. Victory is at hand. At once. Of course. My path is clear. I'm awake. I'm awake. Where shall I strike? At once. Anudora. Of course. Anudora. At once. Our time is short. I'll make short work of it. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Anudora. Of course. My path is clear. At once. Of course. Anudura. Of course. Anudura. I'll make short work of it. I'm awake. I'm awake. Of course. Anudura. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Of course. My path is clear. At once. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Our time is short, of course. My path is clear. I'll make short work. Bear arms. Anudura. Of course. I'll make short work.
Our allies' town needs help.
Victory is at hand.
Killing spree.
Once, I'll make short work. Bear arms.
Our allies' town needs help.
Victory is at hand. Bear arms. In Notre Dame's name. Of course. Anudura. At once.
Our allies' town
Of
needs help.
course. I'll make short. Victory is at hand. Bear
Our
arms.
allies' town needs help.
My path is clear. I'll make short. In Nordrasil's name. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. At once.
Our allies' town needs help.
The sleeper has awakened. Where shall I strike? Of course. My path is clear. I'm awake. I'm awake. Victory is at hand. Our time is short. I'll make short.
Our allies' town needs help.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Of course.
Our allies'
Where
town
shall I
needs
strike?
help.
Bear arms. My path is clear. At once. My path is clear. I'll make short work of it. Anudura. My path is clear. Bear arms.
Our allies' town needs help.
Victory is at hand. Anudura. Once. In Nordrasil's name. My path is clear.
Our
Bear
allies'
arms.
town needs help.
I'll make short work of them. Of course. At once. My path is clear.
Our allies' town
once.
needs help.
Bear arms. Anudura. My path is clear. Victory is at hand.
Our allies' town needs help.
Bear arms. Anudura. At once. My path is clear. Anudura. Of course. At once. I'll make short. My strength is yours.
Our allies' town
Bear
needs help.
arms. Victory is at hand. My path is clear. At once. Anudura. Bear arms.
Our allies' town needs help.
My path is clear.
My life for Nezul.
Our time is short. At once. Of course. I'll make
Our
short.
allies' town needs help.
Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Anudura.
Killing spree.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
I'm awake.
Our
I'm awake.
allies' town needs help.
Anudura. Bear arms. In Nordrasil's name. The sleeper has awakened. Our time is short. My path is clear. Of course. My strength is yours. My path is clear. Anudura. Of course. I'll make short work. Bear arms. Victory is at hand.
Killing spree.
Of course. At once. Of course. I'll make short. Victory is at hand. Anudura. Of course. My path is clear. Anudura. Of course. My path is clear. At once. My path is clear. Of course. At once.
Our allies' town
Of
town needs help.
At once. Where shall I strike? Of course. At once. Of course. I'm awake. I'm awake. In Nordrasil's name. My path.
Our allies' town needs help.
Anudura. How may I serve? My strength is yours. At once. Anudura. Of course. Where shall I strike? At once.
Our allies' town needs help.
Anudura. Of course. I'll make short. Anudura. At once. Anudura. At once. Of course. Bear arms. Anudura. In Nordrasil's name, I'll make short. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand.
Our allies' town needs help.
Of course. My path is clear. Of course. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. At once. Anudura. Of course. At once. Bear arms. I'll make short. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Anudura. Of course. At once. Our time is short. Victory is at hand. Anudura.
Our allies' town needs help.
Where shall I strike? I'll make short. Victory is at hand. My path is clear.
Our allies' town needs help.
My strength is yours. Anudura. Bear arms.
What is your wish?
What? I'm awake. I'm awake. My path is clear. Victory is at hand. Our time is short. Bear arms.
Our allies' town needs help.
Anudura. My path is clear. Victory is at hand. Anudura. My path is clear. Anudura.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
Anudura. Victory is at hand. Of course. Bear arms. Anudura. At once.
Where shall my blood be spilled?
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
Our time is short. Where shall I strike? Anudura. Of course. I'll make short.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
My strength is yours. Where shall I strike?
Are you threatening me?
My strength is yours. At once. My path is clear. Where shall I strike? Of course. Anudura. Of course.
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
I'm awake. I'm awake. My strength is yours. At once. My path is clear. Where shall I strike? At once. Anudura. Bear arms. At once. Of course. I'll make sure. My path is clear. Of course. At once. Bear arms. I'll make sure. Bear arms. I'll make short. Bear arms. Of course. My path is clear. At once. I'll make short. Victory is at hand. I'll make short. Anudura. Of course. Victory is at hand.
Our allies' town
Our
needs
time
help.
is short. In Lord Rasul's name. Our strength is yours.
Our allies'
Bear
town
arms. Victory is at hand. At once. Where shall I strike? Bear arms. I'll make short. Bear arms. In Lord Rasul's name. Our time is short. Of course.
Thy bidding, Master.
The sleeper has... My path is clear. I'm awake. I'm awake. At once. Of course. Anudura.
What?
Where shall I strike?
Dominating.
Of course. My path is clear. Our time is short. I'll make short work of them. Anudura. Where shall I strike? My path is clear. At once. Anudura. Of course. Victory is at hand. At once. Our time is short. Of course. Anudura. Of course. My path is clear. Bear arms!
Dominating. Double kill.
I'll make short work. Anudura. My path is clear. Of course. At once.
Hello.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Victory is at hand. I'll make short work of it. Victory is at hand. My path is clear. At once. Of course. I'll make short work of it. At once. My path is clear. Of course. Victory is at hand. Bear arms! Once. My path. Of course.
Our allies' town needs help.
Victory is at hand. Where shall I strike?
Our allies' town needs help.
Bear arms! Victory is at hand. At once. Anudura. In Nordrasil's name. Of course. At once. Of
Our
course.
allies' town needs help.
My path is clear. At once. Of course.
I bow to your will.
Our time is short. Where shall I strike? At once. Our time is short. Where shall I strike? I'll make short work. Bear arms! Anudura. My path is clear. I'll make short work.
Our warriors have
Give me
engaged
something
the
to do.
enemy.
My strength is yours. Of course. Anudura. Of course. Anudura. Of course. My path is clear. At once. Anudura. path. Bear off.
Killing spree.
At once. My path.
Mega kill.
Victory is at hand. In Nordrasil's name.
Dominating.
Once. Bear off. Anudura. Of course. My path is clear. I'll make short work. At once. Of course. My path is clear. Bear off. Victory is at hand. Of course. Anudura. Of course. My path. Bear off. I'll make short. Anudura. At once. Of course. Anudura. Of course. At once. Of course. My path is clear. At once. Anudura. Bear arms. At once. Of course. Anudura. I'll make short. Bear arms. At once. I'll make short. My path is clear. Of course. At once. Anudura. Of course. At once. Of course. Victory is at hand. I'll make short work of them. Anudura. Where shall I strike? At once. Victory is at hand. My path.
Mega kill.
Bear arms. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. I'll make short work. Of course. Anudura. Of course.
I wish only to serve.
The time is short. Victory is at hand. Bear arms. Anudura. At once. Of course. I'll make short. Bear arms. I'll make short. At once. Of course. At once. My path is clear. Victory is at hand. I'll make short. At once. Anudura. At once. Of course. At once. Bear arms. I'll make short. Bear arms. My path is clear.
Where shall my blood be spilled? Are you threatening me?
Our warriors have engaged the enemy.
Unstoppable.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Anodora. At once. My path is clear. Of course. At once. Of course. Victory is at hand. My strength is yours. My path is clear. Bear arms. Anodora. Of course. I'll make short. Bear arms. Anodora. In Nordrasil's name. Anodora. Of course. Victory is at hand. Anodora. I'll make short. Anodora. At once. Anodora. My path is clear. Anodora. Of course. The sleeper has awakened. Anodora. At once. Of course. At once. Our time is short. Bear arms. I'll make short. Bear arms. I'll make short. Anodora. Of course. At once.
Our allies' town needs help.
My path is clear. Of course. Anodora. Of course. Anodora. My path is clear. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. At once. Anodora. My path is clear. Anodora. Bear arms. I'll make short. Bear arms. My path is clear. At once. Of course. At once. Anodora. At once. My path is clear. My strength is yours. Of course. My path is clear. Of course. Anodora.
Killing spree.
Sleeper has
Dominating.
Of course. Victory is at hand. I'm awake. I'm awake. Bear arms. Victory is at hand. It's no Drasil day. I'll make short. Our time short.
Killing spree.
Victory.
Dominating. Double kill.
Nudura. My strength is yours. Victory is at hand.
Double kill.
Nudura. My path is clear. At once. Of course. At once. Nudura. Of course. Anudura. Of course. Anudura. At once. Anudura. Of course. At once. Of course. At once. Anudura. At once. My path is clear. Anudura. I'll make short. Our time is short. My path is clear.
Double kill.
Of course.
What news?
My strength is yours. Anudura. Victory is at hand. Our time is short. At once. Bear arms. clear. I'll make short work. My strength is yours. Anudura. Once. Anudura. My path is clear. Anudura. At once. Anudura. At once. My path is clear. Of course. My path is clear. Once. Anudura. Bear arms.
My life for Nazur.
Our time is short. At once.